So my name is Alyssa Tobin, and I'm the curator at the Exploration Place. Our project is titled Hodul'eh-a, a place of learning, and it was done in partnership between the Exploration Place and the Lheidli T'enneh Nation in Prince George. So we thought we'd begin with just a brief introduction on who the Lheidli T'enneh are. I'll just try to work this remote. Do you want to try to figure that out? Why? There we go. So the Lheidli T'enneh belong to the Dakelh cultural group of First Nations people who have occupied the central part of British Columbia for thousands of years. And within that cultural group, there are more than 10,000 people. The city of Prince George is situated on the traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh First Nation. The word Lheidli means where the two rivers flow together, and T'enneh means the people. The traditional territory of the Lheidli T'enneh First Nation stretches over 4.3 million hectares, so it's a huge traditional territory. And dated archaeological material proves that First Nations people have been in what is now the city of Prince George for over 9,000 years, probably closer to 10. And the Exploration Place is located within the newly named Lheidli T'enneh Memorial Park, and the park encompasses the historic Lheidli T'enneh Cemetery and sits on the original village site of Lheidli. So the importance of the site we sit on can't be reiterated enough.
So I've been with my facility now for close to 24 years, and one of the most appropriate moves, I suppose, that the previous director made was to identify that we needed to develop a relationship with the Lheidli T'enneh, and that the best way to do that was to send someone in that knew absolutely nothing and hope for the best. Enter Tracy. So the museum wanted to establish this relationship. They initiated this work, and when I began to talk to elders within the Lheidli T'enneh, a gentleman by the name of Ron Seymour, who's now passed, recognized right away that I was sincere but completely inept, and took me under his wing and spent a lot of time, many years, very patiently explaining and re-explaining to me how I needed to approach this project. So we spent the first 20 years doing exactly what Ron said, keeping our mouths shut and our ears open and spending a lot of time learning. And it's only been in the last few years that we've moved tentatively into the next stage, which is working together to build a variety of exhibits. So we've hosted 3 temporary exhibits, one that we brought in on the residential schools. Many of you have probably seen it, Where Are the Children? This we supplemented with some local work and started then to host space for healing circles. And it was there that we discovered just how important this work was going to be to the community, both Indigenous and non. We were faced with a variety of horrific experiences with some of the non-Indigenous peoples that came to the museum for the first time to experience some of the stories that many of them knew nothing about. I grew up in Ontario, and I can tell you that in my education, I was never so much as exposed to the term residential school, let alone given any sort of substantial education on it. So I've learned it all at the foot of the elders at the Lheidli T'enneh. And as we worked through the healing circles, and many of the elders came through during the residential schools project, they expressed the appreciation they had of, it was generally grandparents bringing grandchildren and saying that this was the first opportunity they'd had to really educate these children on what their parents and what they themselves had gone through. So we went from there and to head first into an exhibit called 1913, where we decided to look at the expulsion of the Lheidli T'enneh from the park, which has just recently been renamed Lheidli T'enneh Memorial Park. So at the hands of the Indian agent of the day, the band was unceremoniously removed from the park, which had been designated as Reserve Number 1. They were moved out to IR2 so that they could make room for the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway and essentially for settlers' desires to develop the land. This was not a welcome story, it was not a well-known story, and it was one that again met with great consternation in local media, but great pleasure is not the right word. The First Nations were very pleased to be able to see that story in the museum, in the park where their ancestors were buried and their traditional villages had existed, and they were proud to be able to share those stories and see our facility and our institution stand behind the story and say, it's not a great one to tell, but it is the truth. And it's as we've worked through these very difficult discussions that the trust has continued to build. When the Lheidli T'enneh were invited to host the Elders Conference several years ago, they came to us and asked us to help to develop a material culture exhibit that would be in our temporary gallery and to host several social events during the Elders Gathering. It was met with great accolades. Everyone was very pleased, and it was gratifying to see that the elders from across the province were so impressed that there was a relationship building between a traditional museum and a First Nation. So once this exhibit came down, we wanted to find a way to be able to repatriate objects and artifacts, to create a permanent home within the museum that was going to allow the Lheidli T'enneh to continue to explore their own permanent culture. But it was based on the relationship of trust and friendship and 20 years of me messing things up and them correcting me gently that allowed us to move into the next step, which is where Alyssa comes back in.
So in 2016, we decided that we did want to start this partnership with the Lheidli T'enneh and do a permanent gallery in our museum that basically told everyone this history of the Lheidli T'enneh and everything that they had gone through, and also share their cultural material with everyone. So the Lheidli T'enneh Nation Chief and Council, as well as elders, participated in multiple consultations and made vastly significant contributions in the area of content, language, and style. So in this photo, Chief Dominic Frederick is actually signing a memorandum of understanding, and Tracy's in the background there. And everything in our collection that was Lheidli T'enneh was repatriated back to them with the signing of the MOU and the opening of the gallery. So they graciously have allowed us to display their cultural items, but they are owned by the nation themselves. They are not owned by us. So if they decide that they want to remove the gallery, that is completely up to them. One kind of funny story we have, we did a huge amount of consultation with the nation and the elders, and one of our largest and last consultations was with about 35 to 40 elders. And we had decided that we wanted to call the gallery a place of learning. So now you'll notice the title is Hodul'eh-a. To begin with, we thought it was going to be Ket Hu Hodul'eh. So we were all proud of ourselves. We had come up with these words. This is what the gallery was going to be called. And we had done numerous press releases, grants, radio interviews using the words Ket Hu Hodul'eh. The last consultation, right before we opened, an elder came up to Tracy and I, and everyone was nervous in the room, and Tracy and I were a little bit nervous as well. We didn't want to say anything wrong. And the elder came up and she was laughing really, really hard. She could barely breathe. And she said, "Do you know what you named the gallery?" And it was us, including her, that had named it that. And she said, "It's not the place of learning." She said, "It's the place of learning to make love." So we were all very embarrassed. And then she goes, as she's laughing hysterically, "And that's the polite way of saying it, dear." And so from that moment, we were all at complete ease. The hilariousness of it just made us all feel comfortable with one another. And since then, we have changed the name of our gallery. But that just goes to tell you the importance of consultation. If we had not have had that last meeting, our gallery would have been the place to learn how to make love. And maybe that's not what we want in the museum. So within this, and that's the elder there, so that's pretty much the face. She was laughing the entire time telling us that story. This photo is of her and her mother, Josie Paul, who before the opening actually came through and smudged the entire building, which was incredible. And before the official opening, she actually told our CEO, Tracy, that working on the project was like working with family. And that was really the biggest compliment that she could have given us. This is another elder. So we didn't just work with Lheidli T'enneh elders, we worked with outlying communities as well. This particular elder is showing us her clam blanket, and we traveled a couple hours to see her, and she was just so proud to be able to show it to us and tell her story. And it's really important that when you're doing these types of projects that you're taking time out of your schedules to go to the communities, even if it's a few hours away, and listen to their stories, because it's just so important that we all know them. Switch. So in our consultations, the elders told us things that were really important to them that they wanted displayed in this gallery. They wanted their history to be told. They wanted examples of housing that was used. So our entrance, we decided to build like a pit house. It was a little bit of a learning curve for us. So this is John, our facilities manager and exhibit technician, building our pit house for us. We underestimated the amount of work it would be, even though elders kept telling us it's going to be really difficult to do this. And in the end, we did not give ourselves enough materials to build the pit house, so it'll be completed this spring once we have the wood all ready to go. Do you want to flip? Elders also really wanted a collection of photos that had recently been found from one Lheidli T'enneh family. There's over 1,000 images. Most of them have not been seen in at least 50 years. So we've started with 60 images. Elders have slowly been identifying who's in the images, and just that alone, sitting at a table with elders and them seeing faces that they haven't seen in that many years, is just an incredible experience. I can't really even put it into words. This is a picture of me telling that Hodul'eh-a story, and that's one of the elders that was at the meeting. So he's laughing at me hysterically again. This is another example of just artifacts that the elders really wanted to see put into the gallery. And like I said, consultation was the most important part. We wanted them to tell their story. It wasn't us that was telling it. With doing this sort of work, we had other organizations in town and other people coming to us and saying, we didn't know the Lheidli T'enneh had a cultural collection. We have all of these items that we would also like to return. So this particular object came from a family out of Kamloops who had had a close relationship with the Lheidli T'enneh while they were living in Prince George, and were gifted a lot of really beautiful and culturally significant items that they wanted to give back to the nation. So this was really neat to be a part of, and that's, again, belongs to the Lheidli T'enneh Nation, and it was all repatriated back with the signing of the MOU and the opening of the gallery. This is an example of one of the cases. We did the project entirely in-house, which saved us a lot of money. Anyone that works in a museum probably knows how much money cases like this can cost. So if we had ordered this and had it to the specifications that we wanted it, it would have been over $100,000. So to start on this project, we received a grant for $75,000 to do all of the research, bring the items back, do the traveling, build the cases. So doing that in-house allowed us to use that small amount of money and accomplish what we really wanted to accomplish. These are just some more examples. So there's a few cases in the front you can see. We also did those in-house. And every item in here was selected by the elders. They really wanted these items on display, and they might not be on display permanently, but we'll slowly switch them out and make sure that we're paying attention to the way the light's affecting them, the humidity's affecting them, and everything else. So this is a picture of our grand opening of the gallery. Chief Dominic Frederick is cutting the ribbon, and Tracy is on the one side, and we have a board member on the other. So it was a really exciting moment just because we'd been working on this project for so long. The official opening was a really exciting day for everyone.
So what's next, or so what? We built this great partnership. We've got a wonderful gallery that we've opened. Everything's on display. That's all well and good. Unless you actually people it and animate it, it's not going to get us anywhere. So we've now embarked on the process of developing a public program, not only to address the grade 3 curriculum changes in BC, where First Peoples and local First Peoples are being identified as a key part of the curriculum in that age group, but we're also working towards doing transfer of traditional knowledge between elders and youth. So when we designed the gallery, we deliberately left an open space. We went with polished concrete floors and the ability to control our fire suppression systems in the area so that we are able to open the space up for uses that we can't even imagine yet at this point. We've had a number of people come through and use the space already, and one of the areas that I'm most interested in developing, at our facility we operate an after-school care program, and we also have a licensed preschool. And I'm very excited to start developing programming and curriculum in conjunction with the elders that can fit into that space and start to teach these children at a very early age in a space that they're already comfortable in about this difficult history so that we can build that foundation strong and move into the future together. One of the things that Chief Frederick talks about quite often is that, yes, bad things happened and people did things that some regret and others don't, but to stand side by side and go forward, we have to acknowledge what happened, accept it, and make sure that it never happens again. And part of that is in making sure that history is taught and stays relevant, and that we as places and keepers of knowledge are able to be true to that history. Interestingly enough, one of the projects that we did was a dugout canoe. Alyssa managed to negotiate with a couple of elders last year to have a 10,000-pound slab of green cottonwood tree. You try and get that delivered. I'll be repairing the concrete in front of the building next summer. But we had this delivered. The elders came and set up a tent and worked throughout the course of the summer on this dugout canoe. And not only were they bringing youth in to work on it, but we allowed general visitors to the park an opportunity to swing in ads and to learn some of the traditional techniques. It had never been done in the park in the last 100 years, and yet this would have been a very traditional activity in this area. So the elders were very pleased to be able to bring this knowledge back to a space that was so key to their development. The trust that we enjoy between the museum and the Lheidli T'enneh is by no means commonplace. While we may have initiated this work some 20-odd years ago, it's really been because of the willingness to trust us that we've been able to develop this really close relationship. And humor has been a huge part of what has allowed that to happen. And I'm going to read this. You may have guessed I'm not good with a script, so I'm actually going to put on my glasses and read this because I particularly like the way Alyssa has worded this. The history of Canada is presently being rewritten as we strive to correct past misconceptions and correct wrongs. This museum's work in Lheidli T'enneh Memorial Park on the banks of the Fraser River is our contribution to those collective efforts. Hodul'eh-a has been a significant waypoint on this path that we continue to walk together. Collective efforts such as this gallery are necessary in the advancement of our museums, the revitalization of relationships, and are important steps in reconciliation. And I'll conclude with Masicho. Thank you.